Well, here we are. Saturday, July 9th, 2022. I'm Larissa. So, first things first. Yesterday, oh my God, I thought I was going to peel my entire face off, like that bad Nicolas Cage, John Travolta movie, Face Off. I thought I was going to peel my face off. It itched so bad, top to bottom. And I would have been left with a couple little blemishes where the itchiness was. Oh my God, like a rash. I put some cortisone and some stuff on it, but I'm going to show you what made my face itch like crazy. This is what made my face itch like crazy. Now listen to what it says it's supposed to do. Bird's Nest Visible Difference Aqua Mask Pack. Okay. And then there's some Korean. Or, no, it might be Japanese because it says it's made in Japan. Contained nest extract of swiftlet, improving your damaged and decrepit skin to shiny and elastic by stimulating the skin cell. And as the skin sheet mask is sticking to your skin closely, it helps to clear up the skin in need of moisturizing without stickiness. I'm sorry, it has left red marks on my nose. Crazy. How to use. 1. Refresh your skin by cleansing or clarifying lotion. 2. Open the pouch and apply the mask all over your face firmly, except around your eyes and mouth. 3. Relax and leave it for 20 to 30 minutes. And remove lightly, whatever that means. 4. Gently massage with fingers to enhance the absorption of the remaining residue into the skin tips. If chilled, product is preferred. The sealed pouch itself can be stored in the refrigerator. Then this enhances the refreshing feeling of this product. If warm, product is preferred. The sealed pouch itself can be put into warm water around 30 to 40 degrees. I'm guessing that's not Fahrenheit. For 2 to 3 minutes. After this, take it out and use it. Oh, I should have known better. There's all kinds of things in it. The last thing that's in here is fragrance. And there's all kinds of weird things. Oh, and xanthan gum. And I'm very allergic to xanthan gum. I always react to xanthan gum. Oh my God, my poor face. No, it says it's made in Korea, not Japan. It is in Korean. I had another one up there. Oh, I used these foot things last night. They're from Japan. Those things work. Those things are foot things that pull all the cockapoo out of your feet. Like, from your body. I can feel it working on my liver. When I put those things on my feet, I can feel my liver. It goes, pulls everything out. I can feel it. Those weird Japanese foot patches. Yeah, so this Bird's Nest. I will never use this again. I'm sure there are people for whom that this is an enjoyable experience. I am not one of those people. My poor face. I want to rip my skin off. Oh my God. How are you, Brody? No, I'm not throwing the ball. I'm going to read. I'm going to read here in a minute. Got a new bathing suit. I got a new bathing suit for bathing out in the sun, and we're going to do yard work today. I'll be shrimming the bubba in the yard. So, maybe I'll get a little suntan. We'll see. Anyway, what are we reading? In My Kitchen on My Table, Lenten Tales of Culinary Traditions by Larissa Dahroug. Chapter 7. Oh, see, I'm wearing my babushka. I have to. You have to wear a babushka for this chapter. 7. Pierogi, holushka, halupki, and paska. Growing up, once Holy Week rolled around, it was always time to start thinking about pierogi, halushka, halupki, and of course, the reason for the season, paska. My parents made a familial compromise of sorts, allocating Christmas as the Italian holiday with ravioli, meatballs, and sauce, and Easter as the Slavic holiday with pierogi, halushka, halupki, kielbasa, and paska. I don't really make halupki anymore since I stopped eating land meat, but I have used Beyond Meat ground beef substitute a couple times with decent results. It's not the same. And I still get kielbasa for Omar because he enjoys meat. Making the stuffed cabbage rolls and dumplings and giant loaves of bread was always something I looked forward to participating in growing up. The process seemed almost magical, with everyone in the kitchen given their specific task of kneading, peeling, stuffing, rolling, or pinching, then waiting until Easter to eat and enjoy the feast. When I was really small, we still lived in western Pennsylvania, we would bring a basket to Easter Vigil, stuffed with decorated hard-boiled eggs, candles, and the Pascha bread for the priest to bless. I thought it was a lovely way to decorate the altar. So many families brought their bread, wrapped in lovely new tea towels or lace table linens, with beautiful bows and fancy woven wooden baskets with wide handles, or in delicate china or crystal plates. At the end of Mass, I was allowed to go up to the altar and retrieve our basket. Bread that had been baked solemnly on Holy Saturday was now a sweet and blessed treat. Then, when we got home, the basket was placed in the kitchen, and we went to bed waiting for the Easter bunny. In the morning, my sisters and I would get up early to look for our Easter baskets. I never understood why the Easter bunny would hide our baskets, but not my friends. And my basket always seemed to be the hardest to find. Once we all found our baskets, we'd stuff our faces with marshmallow peeps, jelly beans, peanut butter stuffed chocolate bunnies, and caramel nut turtles. The chocolates were made by my Aunt Wanda. I thought I was very special to have an aunt who made candy for the Easter bunny. Then for Easter breakfast, the table was set with sliced Pascha bread, grilled kielbasa, hard-boiled eggs, green onions, spicy mustard, and horseradish. Meanwhile, my mother or grandmother would get a ham and the halupki in the oven and a giant pot of water on the stove to boil pierogi later for dinner. But Holy Week was about more than just the food. On Holy Thursday, we would go to service, but it was special. For starters, there was no communion offered. We as Catholics are called to put ourselves back in the time in the shoes of those who were alive and participating in the events of the story of Jesus Christ. A common point of meditation was with which of the people from the Bible story did we most closely identify. Holy Thursday is a remembrance of when Jesus asks his closest friends to pray with him in the garden. They had been going from town to town, healing people and preaching, and were being chased by those who did not like the message. The Sermon on the Mount confused and frightened many, and others simply felt threatened by the fact that there was someone who thought differently than they did. Jesus and his friends were in a hiding of sorts, but he knew he would be betrayed by one of his closest and dearest companions. Holy Thursday is the day it happened that Judas Iscariot turned Jesus into the authorities for 30 pieces of silver. Judas acted as a bounty hunter and betrayed his longtime friend and teacher with a simple greeting of a kiss on the cheek. Different Christians and faiths have differing views on the actions of Judas. The fact remains that without Judas's act, there would be no Easter and ultimately no good news of holy sacrifice and redemption. But it makes the events no less tragic. Some Gnostics posit that Jesus himself instructed Judas to turn him in to fulfill the prophecy. Some Christians find this belief to be heretical. But Gnostic texts indicate this is the case and even recognize a text they call the Gospel of Judas. In this text, the author of the story, accredited as Judas, indicates that Jesus and Judas were closer than all the others, and because of this special relationship, Jesus revealed deeper teachings of his personal understanding of his purpose and relationship with his Father in heaven. In the text of the Gospel of Judas and the Gospel of Thomas, Gnostic texts both considered heretical by Catholic and Orthodox doctrine, Jesus speaks of taking on his pleroma, or completion. The biggest difference in the revelation of this concept between the two texts is the account accredited to Judas happens before the crucifixion and is why Judas agrees to turn in his dear friend and teacher, while the account accredited to Thomas happens post-resurrection. The Judas account is rejected by greater church doctrine because Judas is considered arrogant and a betrayer and therefore an untrustworthy source. The Thomas account is rejected for two main reasons. One, Thomas is known as the doubter and needed to actually touch the wounds to believe in the risen Christ, and as such is considered weak of faith and character. And two, the text also deals with gender in a pointedly abstract and interchanging way, acknowledging both male and female aspects of all humans. including Jesus himself. Both texts are exquisite examples of esoteric and abstract thought and are more difficult to interpret and understand when compared with the 4 accepted Gospels found in modern Christian Bibles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Regardless of what text you read, accounts of the Last Supper are consistent in message. Jesus, cognizant of his impending betrayal, instructs Christians to break bread and share wine in his memory and to find him present in that specific action. On Good Friday, Christians acknowledge the trial and crucifixion of Christ. As a small child, if we didn't go to service, my mother asked us to maintain silence for the hours of noon to 3, the time recognized as when the eclipse happened, as Christ hung on the cross and died. Holy Saturday was the solemn day of baking Pascha, preparing the other foods in anticipation of Easter, and preparing the basket to take to Vigil Saturday evening. The entire story of Christ can be found compelling and interesting, whether or not a person believes. Versions and variations of the story happen throughout history and literature across many cultures, and the story is still relevant and relatable today. A person is born under strange circumstances. That person grows up and exhibits unusual talents and abilities and has a markedly different view on the world than others. The person makes a small group of close friends and they tell others they believe the way they are doing things is the person makes a small group of close friends and they tell others they believe the way they are doing things is causing harm. Then the person is betrayed by one of their friends and is gravely punished, only later to be found innocent. It's a very modern story, really. My paternal grandmother, Rose Deskovich-Funyak, and I talked a lot about this when I was a very little girl, and she was teaching me how to make bread. I always felt different from other kids. I've never had a lot of friends and was frequently bullied. She put things in perspective for me, pointing out that no matter how hard things were, Jesus was my friend and understood better than anyone else. I grew up feeling that Jesus was my friend, and I could tell him anything. My grandmother taught me that was a lot of what prayer was about. It's what I think about whenever I make my bread, but especially when I make Pascha. A couple years before my grandmother had the massive stroke that rendered her unable to speak or move the right side of her body, she wrote down her mother's Pascha recipe for me. It differs slightly from the recipe made by my mother, though the results are pretty much the same. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about pierogi, halushka, and halupki first. Pierogi and halupki are both plural words. In Slavic languages, it is a general rule that nouns ending in E, in the E sound, are plural, while words ending in the A or without a vowel sound are singular. So, pirog is the singular of pierogi, and halupka is the singular of halupki. One pirog versus many pierogi, or one halupka versus many halupki. Halushka is a singular word that is the name of a single dish. It is frequently eaten on Holy Saturday or Good Friday, depending on when you prepare your halupki and pierogi. Halushka is a vegetarian dish made of the leftover bits of pasta and cabbage from making pierogi and halupki. It works out well because it is Lent, and during Holy Week it is customary to refrain from eating meat the entire time until Easter, not just on Friday. We'll start by talking about pierogi. Pierogi are a half-moon-shaped boiled pasta dumpling filled with a variety of fillings, then fried in butter, garlic, and onions and served with sour cream. The most common fillings are mashed potato or sauerkraut, but some people make variations stuffed with ground beef, mushrooms, cheeses, prunes, or even dried cherries. My family makes potato and sauerkraut, but I have been known to make mushroom ones too. Sometimes I add cheese to the potato, but honestly my favorite are the way my grandmother made them. The pasta dough my grandmother used for pierogi is different than the dough my mother uses. My mother uses the same dough for both pierogi and ravioli, and it is a combination of the dough her grandmother used for ravioli and the dough my paternal grandmother used for pierogi. The pierogi dough is the same dough that my paternal grandfather's mother used to make her egg noodles for her oxtail soup. So, if you make the Slovakian oxtail soup from the earlier chapter, this is the recipe you use to make the noodles. So this is how you make the pasta dough. Ingredients: 3 large eggs, 3 cups of all-purpose flour, some salt, some cold water. Directions: on a wooden surface, sift the flour into a mound. Sprinkle the mound with a handful of salt. Make a well in the center of the mound and crack your eggs into the well. Break the yolks and begin to work the eggs and flour together. Once the mixture is becoming a consistent kind of texture and color, it will be a bit crumbly but a slightly golden tone. Start to add in the cold water 1 tablespoon at a time. Knead the dough until the water is absorbed before adding more water. You want a smooth ball that pulls together and isn't sticky. It will be stiff to knead, but should be smooth. This will take you some time, 10 to 20 minutes. Once the dough is a beautiful uniform ball, sit it in the oiled bowl covered with a damp towel to rest while you prepare the fillings. This recipe makes 2 dozen pierogi and 4 servings of noodles, 3 dozen pierogi, or 12 servings of noodles. Now let's talk about the fillings. Realistically, you will need to start your fillings before you begin the dough. There are a few things to consider that can change the process. You can do one of 3 things when it comes to the sauerkraut. 1, you can buy raw sauerkraut that needs to be refrigerated. 2, you can buy shelf-stable sauerkraut. 3, you can make your own sauerkraut. I've never made my own sauerkraut. I've heard it's easy, and my great-grandmother Julia Deskovich made her own, but on the 3 occasions I attempted to make my own, I was too scared to try it. I wasn't sure if I had done it right or not, and I didn't want to risk botulism. If you make your own or purchase raw kraut, you will need to cook it before stuffing your pierogi. If you buy a shelf-stabled canned variety of sauerkraut, you only need to season and squeeze it. But they will be a little more tart. It's always better if you cook it. I usually buy a shelf-stable canned variety like Eden Organics. I suppose you could use kraut made from purple cabbage, but it's not the same. It tastes different, and I've never seen anyone put purple kraut in pierogi. Purple kraut is more commonly a German preparation of cabbage. It's delicious, but not right in this dish. If you were cooking the kraut, this is how you do it. 2 containers of raw sauerkraut, about 5 cups total with juice. Salt and pepper to taste. Optional, a can of lager. Dump all the kraut with its juices into the pot and add the beer, salt, and pepper. Simmer over high heat, stirring occasionally, until the kraut darkens in color and about half of the liquid evaporates. Remove from the heat and allow to cool to room temperature. 1 handful at a time, squeeze the remaining liquid from the sauerkraut and set the squeezed balls aside. Keep the leftover juice in a container for later when you make the halushka. This will make enough filling for a dozen pierogi. If you are using shelf-stable canned sauerkraut, you just need 1 big jar. Dump it out in a bowl and stir in some black pepper and then squeeze it as described above, or cook it. Like I said, if you don't cook it, it will be a little more tart. Now let's talk potatoes. Not all potatoes are created the same. Some are wetter and slicker. Some are drier and fluffier. The type of potato you use will dictate how you should prepare it. Ultimately, no matter what potato you choose, it's going to get smashed. But first things first. The number of potatoes you use will depend on the size of the potatoes. You can use russets. Those are usually larger in size. If I use russets or Idaho bakers, I use 3 to 4 good-sized ones and boil them until soft in salted water. Then drain them well and mash them with black pepper and a whole stick of butter. No milk. If I use Yukon Golds or Redskins, I wrap them individually in foil with a little salt and oil and bake them for 45 minutes in a 425-degree oven. These are usually smaller in size, so I will use anywhere between 5 and 10 potatoes. Then I put them in a bowl with pepper and a stick of butter and smash them together. My grandmother always peeled her potatoes, and she always used russets or Idaho bakers, but she waited until they were boiled to peel them, and she always peeled them while they were still hot. I just like the added texture of the skins, so I leave mine on. The most important part is that the potatoes are salted as they cook, not after. And you always use black pepper, butter, and no milk. You want the filling to be thick and almost firm, not silky and creamy like mashed potatoes. You can also add in some chives, onion powder, garlic, and or cheese if you like. It's tasty, but like I said, I prefer mine with just good old potatoes and butter. This makes enough filling for a dozen pierogi. So now, we're in the pierogi homestretch. It's finally time to assemble your pierogi. This is how you do it. Ingredients: your prepared rested dough, your prepared sauerkraut filling, your prepared potato filling. Directions: remove the dough from the bowl and separate it into 3 equal-sized pieces. Place 1 piece on a lightly floured wooden surface and roll it out into a long log. Now cut the log into 12 equal-sized pieces and set them to the side. Reflour the surface lightly and place 1 small piece of dough in the center using a rolling pin. Roll it into a circular shape about 1/8 of an inch thick. Add a generous spoonful of filling to the center. Fold the dough over in half and crimp the edges with a fork. You can leave it like this or trim a bit of the excess Trim a bit of the excess dough and uniformly crimp over the edge to make a pretty braided-like finish, like in the picture above. Place the finished pierogi on a wax paper-lined pan, placing a piece of wax paper between each stacked layer as you repeat the process with the other portion of dough. For the purposes of this recipe, the final portion of dough was used to make noodles. You can also use any trimmed pieces of dough from making the pierogi, but before we talk about noodles, when all of your pierogi are complete, put the tray in the freezer overnight. You could also boil them fresh without freezing them, but I like to have them ready ahead of time, so all I need to do is boil and fry them on the day we eat them. For the last portion of dough, roll it out in a single flat sheet about 1/16 of an inch thick. Then, using a sharp knife or pizza wheel, cut the dough into strips the thickness you like your noodles. I like wide noodles for halushka or soup. Lay the noodles out on a flour-dusted, smooth surface tea towel to dry overnight. Then boil them like you would any other noodle. You can also boil them fresh, but they can tend to stick together. They taste better when they're boiled fresh. You could also freeze them. Okay, so now you have the pierogi made, but not cooked. This is how you cook them. Boil a large stock pot of well-salted water. While you are waiting for the water to boil, dice up a large white onion and crush a few cloves of garlic. In the largest frying pan you have, or I like to use my wok, put the onion, garlic, and a stick of butter. Melt the butter and allow the onions and garlic to soften, but don't fry them just yet. Once the water is at a roaring boil, start to drop your frozen pierogi in one at a time. Stop adding dumplings once the water stops boiling. Wait for the water to come back to a boil for 8 to 10 minutes while keeping your butter and onions warm but not quite browning. A couple minutes before the pierogi are ready, turn the heat up on the butter. Then, once the pierogi are ready, using a large slotted spoon, remove the pierogi from the water one at a time and drop them into the frying pan. Repeat the process until all of the pierogi you want to make are done and in the pan with the butter. Allow the dumplings to get a little crispy on one side. Plate and garnish with fresh chopped parsley and serve with sour cream and wine of your choice. Pinch, pinch. The next thing to work on is the halupki. Cabbage rolls are a dolma, and very similar in process to stuffed grape leaves, but truth be told, a cabbage leaf is much easier to stuff than a grape leaf, so this is how you make them. Ingredients: 1 large dense head of smooth green cabbage with the core removed, 1 large yellow onion, 1 cup par-cooked white rice, 1 pound ground beef or ground beef substitute like Beyond Meat, but like I said, it's not the same. 1 head garlic minced, a generous handful of finely chopped fresh parsley, a pinch of paprika, a splash of olive oil, a pinch of dried oregano, a pinch of thyme, 1 raw egg, 1 tablespoon breadcrumbs, or more. But with the rice, you got the rice already. You could just put in breadcrumbs, but I like it with rice. Salt and pepper to taste, 1 tube tomato paste, 1 stick butter, 1 can tomato sauce, or concentrated tomato soup plus 1 can water. Whatever you have, either works. Directions. Core your cabbage, leaving the rest of the head intact. Rinse the cabbage under cold water and remove any severely damaged outer leaves. Put the cabbage in a wide saucepan, cord side down, with a couple cups of water. Cover the saucepan and turn the heat on medium. While that begins to steam and soften the leaves of the cabbage, add the ground beef, par-cooked white rice, diced onion, half the garlic, other herbs and spices, olive oil, egg, and breadcrumbs into a mixing bowl and combine together well. Cut the butter in equal pats and put in the bottom of the Dutch oven, a deep baking pan or crock pot. Using a pair of strong tongs, peel 1 leaf from the cabbage at a time and place it on a flat cutting board surface with the core side pointed towards you. Sound familiar? Scoop a handful of the meat mixture and place it at the base of the cabbage leaf. Roll into the cabbage leaf, then tuck either side into the raw meat. Line the Dutch oven, baking pan, or crock pot over the butter pats. Repeat with each cabbage leaf until you have used all the filling. Sprinkle the rest of the garlic over the rolls and then distribute the tomato paste over the surface. Pour the tomato sauce or condensed soup plus 1 can of water over the top of the rolls. At this point, you can either cook the rolls immediately or put them in the refrigerator overnight. If they are coming out of the refrigerator to be cooked the next day, add half an hour to the recommended cooking time below. If you use a crock pot, cook on medium all day. If you are using a Dutch oven, put the lid on and bake at 350 for 3 to 4 hours. If you're using a baking pan, cover with foil and bake at 350 for 3 to 4 hours. Set aside any unused cabbage for the halushka. Serve with your pierogi. This recipe makes a varying number of halupki. It depends on the size of the cabbage, but in general, this recipe will serve up to 5 people. So, by now, you've been busy making pierogi and halupki for Easter, and you are probably starving. But it's not time to eat the feast just yet. It's dinner time, though, and everyone's mouths are watering in anticipation. Remember that leftover sauerkraut and sauerkraut juice, soft cabbage leaves, and noodles you made? Well, it's time to make halushka. So, this is how you make it. Ingredients: cabbage left over from making halupki, sauerkraut and juice left over from making pierogi, 1 medium-sized yellow or white onion diced, a head of garlic minced, half a stick of butter, the noodles you made, a large bunch of fresh parsley chopped coarse, 1 egg per person eating, salt and pepper to taste, ketchup. Directions: in salted water, boil, cook, and drain your noodles and set them aside. In a wide frying pan, put the butter and onion. Sauté until the onions become soft and start to brown. Add the cabbage, sauerkraut, not the juice just yet, salt, pepper, and garlic. Sauté until things start to brown. Add the noodles and sauerkraut juice. Once the juice disappears, whisk the eggs together and drizzle over the pan. Sprinkle in the parsley. Give everything a mix with your wooden spoon. Reduce the heat and cover the pan for 4 minutes. Remove the lid and stir the contents of the pan once more to be sure the eggs are cooked all the way. Plate and serve with ketchup. Yes, ketchup. This recipe serves between 2 and 4 people, depending on how much leftovers you had from the other process. If you had any potato, you could add that in too. But come on, you know you ate any potato that was left over with a spoon already. You know you did. You know you did. Finally, it's time to make the pascha. First, this is my great-grandmother Julia's recipe. She baked this for the Ukrainian Orthodox Church she attended in Naniglo. Greek Orthodox make a variation of this bread as well, with a dyed red egg on top for Easter, and some Eastern European cultures add currants or raisins to the dough. This is to represent the blood shed by Christ during his passion. I don't make it that way. I just think it's interesting to see the way the tradition is celebrated across different cultures and ethnicities. So this is how you make my great-grandmother Julia's pascha. Ingredients: 3 cups scalded milk, ½ cup sugar, 2 teaspoons salt, 1 cup melted butter, 6 eggs beaten. Beat those eggs. Rotten eggs. Beat them. No, don't use rotten eggs. They gotta be fresh eggs. Half a large cake of yeast, 3 packages of dry active. Half a cup lukewarm water, 12 to 14 cups of flour. Yes, you heard that right. In directions: in a large bowl, combine milk, sugar, and salt. Cool butter to lukewarm. Reserve 2 tablespoons of the eggs. Add the rest of the milk mixture, taking care that the milk is not too hot and curdles the eggs. Then add the butter. This is similar to the process of making a pudding or custard. We will talk more about this in the next chapter. Crumble yeast into the water, then let it stand for 10 minutes. Then add it to the mixture. Add the flour 2 cups at a time until the dough can be kneaded or can be handled. Knead on a floured board for 15 minutes. It's important. Sometimes I haven't kneaded it long enough and it's not right. You got to knead it 15 minutes at least, but not too much. You got to know. You try it a couple times, you'll see. Place the dough in a greased bowl and let it rise for 1.5 hours. Knead it again for 8 to 10 minutes and let it rise a second time for 45 minutes. After the second rising, shape into 4 round loaves. Place in greased round pans and allow to rise again until the pans are nearly full, not quite 45 minutes. Brush with the reserved egg mixture and bake in an oven preheated to 355 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes or until they sound hollow when tapped. Christos voskrev. Christ is risen. Well then, that's how you make your pascha. It's so good. It's so good. It is. It's so good. So I think we got like one more chapter And then the appendix and all that stuff. So what am I going to do in the garden today? I got to pick up the thatch of the daffodils. They're finally all browned. I put some of that into the compost, and I have a couple ferns that I'm going to clear out. I'm going to clear out the dead leaves, and I have a couple ferns I'm going to cut down altogether. 2 little ones I'm going to cut down. And there's some weeds I need to pull up in an area where I don't want them. And I'm going to trim back the artichokes, pull them out. I might put in some seeds. I might plant some seeds today. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know. I might turn 2 of those beds up there. And then I might sun my boobies. I like doing that. It's supposed to be warm. It's supposed to be warm, so I will sun my boobies. Yes. Sounds like a plan. Oh, and then tonight for dinner, I made those raviolis yesterday, and they're in the freezer. We're going to make sauce. I'm going to make a red sauce, like an El Greco red sauce, I think. Put olives and spinach and stuff in a red sauce. Yeah, on the barbecue, on the grill. We're going to have barbecue raviolis. Yeah. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. That's one big fat girl. Big fat girl. Yeah.